Good morning and welcome to another live stream. First things first, if you like what I do, I really need your support. If you could hit that subscribe button and select all notifications bell, that way when I release stuff, you'll be notified straight away. It's just that I do this and I pay for it out of my own pocket, and it's getting really expensive. And if I get 1,000 subscribers, then I can get reimbursed by YouTube from advertising. So please hit that subscribe button. I'd really appreciate it. Now, last stream, we touched on Serco, a third-party call center that the NDIA has contracted to. So when you call the NDIA general call number, you're actually going to Serco, a third-party call center, not the NDIA. The NDIA contract to Serco. I wasn't happy about this because Serco's headquartered in the UK. They have offices in Victoria, America, India, all around the world. And I was not happy. I was really quite angry that my personal private information is being contracted out to a third party. Now, I know the government has written into the contract of confidentiality and privacy and non-disclosure agreements, and they have to have proper software protection on their computers. But that doesn't mean squat, really, does it? We know that in 2022, 2023, an NDIA staff member sold data from the NDIA to service providers. Now, in May 2025, he was convicted of that crime, but he didn't go to jail. He's got a 2.5-year community services order. That means he is strictly controlled while he's out in the community, not in jail. I wasn't happy with that either. I think he should have gone to jail. He breached our trust. He breached our privacy. There's no excuses for it. Now, I live in a regional town, and I know there's no secrets in this town because everybody knows somebody and you just can't keep a secret. And I've had service providers in the past, not my current ones, but in the past, that have breached my privacy and confidentiality by discussing my information. They didn't give my name, but when you live in a small, tight-knit community, you don't have to give names. You know who people are talking about. Plus, other people don't care. They'll just say and do whatever they want because there's no repercussions. So what we've done over the last week or two was do a bit of a deeper dive into what the NDIA has done with Serco. Now, under the Privacy Act of 1988, we should have been notified that Serco is being contracted to, and we have every right to refuse Serco to access our data, our information. Now, the government's put in their contracts that they have to have audits and they can't disclose things. They have to have proper software protection. And how do we know they're doing that? How can we be absolutely certain, 100% guaranteed that they're doing that? How do we know they're not doing screen grabs and giving that information away or selling it? And how do we know that that information, that the data is supposed to be protected here in Australia, but because this overseas call centre, Serco, they have a branch in Victoria, which is contracted out to the NDIA. And like I said before, they have offices and call-out centres all around the world. Now, what's to stop the people working in Victoria sharing information with their superiors in India or America or the UK or the Philippines. Are we supposed to trust the government to do the right thing? No. I'd rather trust a pedophile than trust a politician. I have no trust in any politician. I have no confidence in any politician, and I believe nothing that comes out of their mouth. That's because of my lived experience, my views and opinions of what I've experienced over my lifetime. I trust no one. Not 100%. And we're supposed to give up our personal private information. Now, I didn't find out about Serco until about 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. And since then, I put requests into the NDIA for information on Serco. I've emailed Serco for information. And I'm waiting for their response. And so far, we haven't got anything back. But I don't know about anyone else, but I am not happy that the government has done this in 2018 without our knowledge. Everyone's personal private information is up for grabs. Now, before I got onto the NDIS, my personal private information, only myself and my GP knew everything. Not even my wife knew everything. But when I applied to go on the NDIS, I was one of the first ones in this area to go into the NDIS. They asked for my personal information, personal care information. I said, oh, well, don't want to give it because it's personal and I find it degrading and humiliating. I just don't want people to know. And they said, well, if you don't give it to us, you can't get onto the NDIS. Now, in my opinion, that's been blackmailed and extorted for information. But I gave it up because I needed the NDIS. Now, at that meeting when I first went to the NDIS, there was myself, the rep from the NDIA who was getting the information, 2 LACs, and a support worker. So I've gone from 2 to 5 people knowing my information. Now, you extrapolate that to all the LACs that have ever worked in my area. When I was using the LACs, there were 8 to 10 LACs had access to my information. Now, they live in the same town I do. How do I know they're not talking about my personal private information? That can't be guaranteed. It's impossible to guarantee it. Now, you expand that out to service providers, support workers, fund managers, support coordinators. Any person accessing my data has access to that information. So I've gone from myself and my GP knowing everything to I don't know how many. Dozens and dozens of people are accessing my information. And if I ever win lotto, I'll turn around to the NDIS and tell them to stick it and to delete my information. Now, getting back to these third-party call centres like Serco. Now, I looked into it, and under the Privacy Act of 1988, when you call the NDIA and you go to the general call centre, which is Serco, and if you ask them, do you work for Serco, who then contracts out to the NDIA to do this call centre, and they say, no, I work for the NDIA, were there in breach of the Privacy Act, in particular APP 1.2 and 1.3. They're legally required to be honest and accurate in the information. So if I asked if they work for Serco and they say no, or they're in breach of APP 1.2 and 1.3. Now, because I only found out a couple of weeks ago about Serco, the NDIA are in breach of APP Section 6 and Section 11 because I never gave my permission and that I didn't even know they were giving out my information to anyone outside the NDIA. Now, just because they're contracted doesn't mean squat. If I had known they were going to contract out to Serco or any other third-party organisation, I would have objected straight away. My personal private information is supposed to be my personal private information. It's not up for grabs. It's not up for sale. It's not up for trade or barter. It's a breach of my private information. So I'm just waiting on the response from the NDIA and Serco and those questions that those emails I sent off. And once I get a response, I'll read what my questions out and their responses. And if I'm not happy, I'm going to the Office of the Australian Information Commission to lodge a formal complaint. I had no idea in 2018 the NDIA contracted out to Serco. I would have objected straight away if I had known. But because I didn't know and only recently found out, I'm still within my rights to object and force the NDIA, when I make a phone call, not to use Serco and to refuse Serco access to any of my information. That's my rights under the Privacy Act of 1988 and under the Australian privacy principles. That's my right, and that's your right. You can do the same thing too. We shouldn't have to take it because they're the government. I mean, what's the government done for us lately? Inflation's up. Electricity's up 40% since Labor's been in. Now, here in the news this morning, private health insurance is going up 4.41% the 1st of April. Now, as many people know, I had open heart surgery last year, and that operation and that stint in hospital cost $120,000. And I cannot complain 1 ounce about the treatment and my medical treatment that I got from that private hospital in Newcastle and from the surgeon, the nurses, the anaesthetist, the intensivist. I was so happy with the way I was treated. The operation, there was a few hiccups along the way, but it worked out really well. It saved my life. But yeah, when are we going to say to the government, just stop? You're abusing our rights. When you're abusing our rights, you're not even telling us what you're doing. Now, when the NDIA wants to make rule changes, and they're going to introduce it on the 1st of April, they'll drop it right at the very last day in March. So people don't have enough time to do their research and do due diligence on the changes. They're circumventing the proper process, in my opinion. It's disgraceful. Now, Albanese doesn't care about anyone else but his own ideology, in my opinion. I have no respect for him. I do not like him. I despise him. I always thought Kevin Rudd was Australia's worst Prime Minister. And the worst thing about Kevin Rudd was I voted the wanker in. I actually voted for him in 2007. Biggest mistake of my life. And I thought Rudd and Gillard were the worst two Australian Prime Ministers this country's ever had. Nan up pops Albanese. And he thinks it's okay that people of Jewish faith in Australia are forced to send bodyguards to escort their children to and from school. He did nothing about it. And what happened in Bondi Christmas time last year? 15 people lost their lives. A 10-year-old girl and a man who actually survived Auschwitz concentration camp in World War II. He survived it. Come to Australia, that gets killed on the beach for being Jewish. And I personally blame Albanese for that. It's his responsibility. He's the Prime Minister. He knew about the threats. He knew what they were going through, but he chose to do nothing. He just wanted to legitimise Hamas. That's more important to him. Now, I don't want to see anyone hurt in Palestine or Israel or Australia. But when you legitimise a terrorist organisation, like Albanese did, he just invited problems. When he did it, I said to my wife, he's just opened Pandora's box. Then something's going to happen. Now you watch. And I was right. And what's he doing to protect Australia now? He's letting all these ISIS brides back in. Yes, I've heard that the government has to do it because they're Australian citizens. Well, they chose to leave Australia. They chose to go overseas and marry terrorists and raise families with them. And when ISIS collapsed, they wanted to come back to Australia. Why? Why should we let them back in? They're just going to bring their prejudice, their bigotry back in with them. They're not going to assimilate. I don't trust them. Why aren't we protecting the people who are already here, who go to work every day, obey all the laws, pay all the taxes, do all the right things? We're the ones that need protection. This government has to be the worst government we've ever had in this country. Now, when you look at that and the way the NDIS is being used as a political football, and it's a football for the media to kick around, and who's it hurting? It's hurting people with disabilities because we're getting the blame because the governments have continually stuffed it up. Why are we being held responsible? Why are we being the ones held out that we're causing the cost blowout to the NDIA? Every time you turn around in this country, if you have a disability, you're being abused one way or another. Every day. Every time I go out, I try and talk to people. They talk to the person I'm with, not me. That's why I only go to certain shops where I live, where they talk to me, they put things in my hand. They treat me like a person and an equal. Out of all the dozens and dozens of businesses where I live, I go to 1, 2, 3, 4 businesses. Because I'm treated with respect, I'm treated with a bit of dignity. I'm treated like an equal. They speak to me, not the person I'm with. Now, years ago, I got because I'm blind and use a white cane. I got disorientated one day because there were signs out where they shouldn't have been because there was a by-election come up where I live. So I got disorientated. Eventually found my way, and a week later I went back down and I was having sighted guide with my mobility instructor. We were walking along talking, and this bloke comes up and says, "Oh, excuse me," not to me, but to my mobility instructor. And she said, "Yeah." He said, "Oh, I seen him out last week, and I just want to know if he's allowed out." What do you mean if I'm allowed out? And she goes, "Well, yeah." He says, "Oh, so he's allowed out by himself then?" And I just didn't know. One of the rare times in my life that I was gobsmacked. I didn't know what to say. So we walked off and went up, did some orientation, come back, walked back the same way. And when we got back to where that bloke was, I actually started laughing because I thought it was just so stupid, a stupid question and a stupid, outdated way of thinking. And I started chuckling to myself. And my mobility instructor said, "What are you laughing at?" I said, "Oh, that dickhead wanted to know if I was allowed out by myself." And she goes, "Oh, he's just over there." So I don't care. He's a dickhead. Now, people with disabilities get treated like that every time they leave their front door. And the NDIA and the call centre are making it way harder for that to happen. I mean, this government and the NDIA, they're just failing miserably. And we've got to wait till the next election to get rid of them. Well, I don't want to wait that long. I'm just sick of it. So, while we're doing this investigation, my support worker, Chris, is with me here today. We come across this news article about VIQ. What's it, Chris? VIQ Solutions or something?
Yes.
I'll just get Chris to read out this article. It's just an eye opener, and this is going on exactly what I'm just talking about. Do you just want to read that out, please, Chris?
Okay, so it's about highly sensitive Australian court data has been accessed by a foreign entity based in India. So this is an article from the ABC News. It says highly sensitive Australian court files have been accessed by foreign actors in breach of federal law and Commonwealth contractual obligations. Workers raised concerns with managers at FIQ Solutions, the company responsible for the data breach, months ago. They were told that it was not relevant and were directed to stop spreading rumours about the issue. The transcription of the court case is, in most jurisdictions in Australia, is done by VIQ Solutions, which is based in Canada and employs transcribers in Australia. An ABC investigation found VIQ Solutions subcontracted work to E24 Technologies, which is a company based in India that specialises in automated voice-to-text technology. And the people that were doing it were based in India. They're experts in Australian English. So I'm just paraphrasing some of the articles. Anyway, basically the data by this Indian third-party company was breached. Access to state and federal court cases have been accessed by foreign entities. It's a national security risk. And this is a quote. The incredibly sensitive information from organisations like ASIO, the Australian Federal Police, has been given in private court because it could be addressing links to international crime organisations and potential foreign interference in the country. So there is sort of state secrets as well as personal information relating to all kinds of court cases, including family law court cases.
So there you go. a third-party contractor's contract to another company, so that goes to a fourth-party contractor who's selling the information, passing out the information from the Australian Family Law Court, from ATO and the AFP. And that poses a national security risk. So if that's happening, what in the hell does the Australian government think Serco are going to be any better? Oh, because we have a contract with them? Big deal. So what? Who cares? Apparently not the government, not the NDIA. So I don't know about anyone else, but I am just fed up with this crap. I'm forced to give up my personal private information. Then I find out years later it's been distributed to a third-party organisation, Serco. And how do I know that, Serco, if they're working from home, they have the proper security software on their computers, they're not doing screen grabs, their superiors in other countries aren't having access to it. Who are we supposed to trust to audit it? The government? Are they going to put their hand to, we made a mistake, they're actually releasing the information? No, they're going to try and cover it up, hide it. And as I said about 18 months ago, I spoke to someone who worked up very high up in the NDIA in governance and risk management, where they put CCTVs up in their offices, and they didn't realise, or they didn't think at the time, that because they were Chinese CCTVs, that there's a good chance of the Chinese government hacking into them and recording information. So they took them down. Governments don't make mistakes, do they? Or the main HQ for the NDIA in Melbourne, they had 4 floors in a big commercial building in Melbourne, but that wasn't good enough for them. They had to go and buy their own building for $500 million. Then we find out that the NDIA staff responsible for the contracts for Salesforce were given free meals and holidays and booze, and so Salesforce got that contract, and I went for like $20 million to being up around $200 million by 2030. Because they're operating off a license fee rather than data storage. So every time somebody accesses your information, they have to pay a fee. That's why the cost blowout from Salesforce is ballooning out to the hundreds of millions of dollars. But, because of the cost blowout, so who do you pick on? Oh, the participants. And I've mentioned before, a former member of the IOC has their own business as a service provider, and it only has themselves as a client. But according to the NDIA, you cannot employ family and friends, but you can have your own company as a service provider and only have yourself as a client. So your company's benefiting from your funding. Does that sound right? No, it doesn't sound right to me. And I'm still fighting the NDIA over that information. And I'm not going to stop, because if that is a loophole, then that loophole needs to be closed. It's not fair, like when 1/3 of plan reviews, 1/3 of all plan reviews have their funding cut by 22.5%. But this person's allowed to have their own business as a service provider and only has themselves as a client. So his company's benefiting from his funding. It's not right, especially when people are getting their funding slashed by 22.5%. The NDIS is a great thing. It's done more for people with disabilities in the last, since 2013 or 2015, 2016, when it was introduced nationwide. It's done more in 10 years than all these other organisations have done in the last 100 years to promote people with disabilities. But it's been so badly run by, not by the Labor Party, but by the coalition as well. Totally mismanaged. But it's easier just to blame people with disabilities than it is to blame themselves, isn't it? The government won't take responsibility for screwing it up. They'd rather blame us and take our funding. When the NDIS is a privilege, it's not a right. But what we do have a right to is the government running it properly. That's a right. And I'm just over these third-party contractors coming in, accessing personal private information. How do I know what the hell they're doing with it? Are they doing screen grabs? They're recording it? Is the government actually going to these people's homes if they work from home and auditing their computer to make sure they're doing the right thing? They haven't got malware in the computer? I don't know. The government's not telling us. It's just one monumental screw up by the government. Now, when I first went onto the NDIS, all the state-run services, disability services, were forcing people off those services onto the NDIA and shutting those state services down. Now we're all on the NDIS. There's no state-run services. Now the government's trying to get them back. Well, you should have done your job properly in the first place and made sure that didn't happen. This government's got a lot to answer for. Anyway, when I get the response to those emails from the NDIA and Serco, I'll do another live and I'll put the information up and I'll get Chris to read out the questions and the responses. Because everybody has the right to know the way their personal private information is being held and accessed. I think it might do us for today, Chris. And there's no anyone in the chat asking questions or all? No. Okay. Well, I'm going to call it quits for today. I thank everyone for joining in. And if you have any information about the things I've been discussing, please send it to me at blindadvocate007@gmail.com. And I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Okay. All right. Thanks, Chris. Thank you, everyone.